So, how would you define or explain what the ego is? Because I'm very fascinated about exploring the ego, but I'm also fascinated how to explain to people. Because a lot of times, it's like the water you're swimming in, so people can't really understand like what is this ego.
It's a great way to put it. The ego is it's water that we're swimming in. We're so absolutely comfortable in it. We don't even realize that it is a construct. We don't even realize that we came into this world, or we came out of this world, and we were egoless. Our first year or two, we were just these creatures of pure consciousness, just sensations, living in the absolute present moment. Imagine when we were one, we weren't trying to improve ourselves. We weren't trying to, deal with symbols. Language didn't exist yet, so we were so immediately in the moment. And so much of this is about that right brain state of awareness that so many of us are trying to get back to. Not that we want to regress back to infancy, but we want to have the best of both worlds, be able to use the left brain thinking mind when it's useful. And I would guess it's useful about maybe 2 hours a day. And I'm kind of being real generous with that.
Hmm.
But then we want to make our home the place that was our home for those first couple years. And then language came along, and that's when the I thought really started to happen. And I remember with my kids, I could put them in front of a mirror, and they didn't even know that was them in there. And something clicked about 2 or 3, and all of a sudden we have this really unusual thought. Ramana Maharshi calls it the I thought. And he says that's really the beginning of all other thoughts. And I think he really was onto something. That I thought fundamentally changed the structure of our experience. And we started seeing everything in terms of subject object. It's me having these perceptions, and it really stuck. So as adults, a typical adult might say something like, I have depression. And that stems from this early training that we had when we were 2, or we were taught that you are the subject, and things happen to you. And it's really it's very noticeable when you watch kids, because as soon as the I thought catches from 2 to it's I, me, and it's just, and Piaget, the psychologist, talked about that egocentrism that's so obvious. And that never really goes away, because that I thought, which changed all of us so much. And again, it's a product of the left hemisphere. It's a product of the way the left hemisphere works. It's that categorical processing. It's mixed in with beliefs, and it's mixed in with very advanced kind of pattern recognition. Human beings are so good at this that we still beat the machine. So if you've ever gone online and it wants to see if you're human, you'll get some bizarre, font that only you as a human, because we're so good at pattern recognition, and the computers are still catching up to us. So we're so good at all these talents, and of course this pattern, when it looked inside it thought, well, there's a me in there. And it's just like looking up the stars and seeing, like, patterns and warriors and all that. And that same thing happened to us. We looked inside and said, oh, there's a me. That's when the ego started. But then we're in a culture that literally cultivates that I thought. And, how many times do we get asked, what are you going to do? What are your plans? And always comparison with our I thought with others. And so we become very competitive, and it's kind of this, okay, well, what are your grades? I mean, think about it, even from first grade, they have our I thought competing with other I thoughts. And imagine if we just had a school like, listen, let's just let the learning experience happen. And that would be so alien for us to really, and it's something I'm actually experimenting with my students right now. I'm like, let's just forget about grades. Let's see what happens if we forget about everything and just get into just learning for the experience of learning, and see it's, because I think it's there. But that I thought, then it was like self-improvement. The second we had the I thought, our mission for self-improvement began. And so we all started trying to improve ourselves when we were about 2. And that's just a heck of a thing to put on a human being, because that kind of mission, it never has an end point. And this is why we see people who have billions of dollars, and they followed us with a few people. They'll say, well, I think my favorite quote was Rockefeller. They said, "When will you have enough money?" And he said, "When I have just a little bit more than I have." And that's so beautiful because it shows when you have a self and you're trying to better the self, and that just means more self. That means expanding the I thought so it becomes bigger and bigger. There's no end to it. Right? It always shifts the goalpost, and then it wants more. And so the I self, that's why the I self, when I say no self, no problem, the I self, the I thought puts us on a path. It's kind of a self-destructive path because it's just all consuming. And I actually wrote a book before this. I called it The Neurotic's Guide to Avoiding Enlightenment. And the whole book was about avoiding the self-help path. Because if the self really is an illusion, what are you really trying to help in the first place? And I think, as Alan Watts pointed out so often, he said, look, if the self could help the self, I mean, wouldn't it have done it already? Right? So there's so many roadblocks when we go down to this idea that, like, when we go down this path and saying, well, I am a me, and I'm this ego, which is just a collection of thoughts that get glued together in a way that can be almost arbitrary at times. And then you say, how am I going to fix that? How am I going to fix this? And that's why the Buddha's lecture was so influential, because he was able to show, like, is there really any solid, is the self as solid as you think it is? And so in my book, I had that one exercise, how many selves do you have in a day? And I think so many people like that exercise because it shows that you're not this solid idea that stays consistent. You're actually, if you start following the selves come and go all the time. And so you may have like a momentary bit of anger, and then you're wondering, oh, what came over me? And then some other self is confused because they're like, well, just a second ago, I was very peaceful. So we're trying to keep that glue together, to glue something that it's not really possible, because there's just this flow during the day, and you may have 100 selves. And so, and then sometimes a lot of times there's no self at all. And so maybe when we're finished, I've got a couple things to do, but maybe I'll grab a guitar and start playing, and the self it's gone. There is no self, but the thought just isn't being entertained for a while. And a lot of us actually spend more time than we think in this state of no self. But the problem is that when we try to evaluate that, and we say, because when the self thought comes back online, it's like, I call it the refrigerator light problem, because again, every time you open the refrigerator, it's the lights on. So you just assume the light's always on. So the thinking mind is the same thing. It's like, well, the ego must have been here all day, because here it is assessing, how long it's been around. And so we all think the ego is around all the time. But one of the things I try to do in the book is show, look, if you've ever heard the saying, like, you're already a Buddha, it's this idea, like, you already have a state of presence. And it's happening all the time. And sometimes you go for a walk and it's peaceful, but then the thinking mind comes back online, and it has no interest in remembering or that state of peace. Because it gets back online, it wants to solve problems, and it wants to find problems. and these are the two worlds. That's why I like talking about the left and right brain. We've got this left brain world of problems, of I thoughts and egos, and we have the right brain world of nature, peace, and no self, and meditation, mindfulness, and that's that deep sense that everything's absolutely fine right now. And we get these. It's just when the thinking mind turns back on, it wipes the slate clean. And so we think, oh, I'm a dreadful mess, and I need work, and I need to fix myself. And you're already fixed. You just kind of get lost in these thoughts that something's wrong.